90% of people reading this haven't subscribed. Why?
Just do it!
As always, we will be starting with the F category. These are the games I do not recommend to you whatsoever. They fell below a 4 on the scale, and honestly, that's pretty staggone sad. First is Birdie Crush. Birdie Crush is the worst gacha game I have ever played, guys. Honestly, I don't see much redeeming to it. I was hoping it would be like Mario Golf. I still, to this day, want to know how they messed up on that system so badly. I didn't honestly feel like I was playing golf a lot of times. I felt like I was watching a golf anime where they were trying to be uwu and over the top at just about every turn, and I hated it, okay? They do have some graphical appeal to it, but it does feel a little bit old and dated. The only thing that Birdie Crush has going for it is you cannot mistake the fact that it is Birdie Crush. It is unique as it can be. It is the only golf gacha that I have ever seen, experienced, and I hope that it stays that way because this really turned me off from the whole idea. Got a 2.14 and is by far the worst on this list. Now, something that may surprise you is seeing Idol Heroes be the next one listed here. Idol Heroes is a game that I have long talked pretty poorly about on this channel, despite it being one of the highest ranking earning games that this market currently has to offer. Idol Heroes, really, I'm not sure why people to this day truly get into it, other than the fact that their wallets are so sunk into it that they're gonna keep pushing. A lot of the guilds that you see out there are going inactive very quickly. They're constantly spinning up new ways to fight, to have their active people engage with active people, because a lot of their player base is dead and gone, and it looks a lot more populated than it actually is. I've been watching the community numbers and it is going down. The only redeeming thing about Idol Heroes is the progression system, and even that at the upper ends, probably one of the scammiest games I have seen. Overall, if you play Idol Heroes and you enjoy Idol Heroes, please continue watching because there will be other games that catch your attention that I obviously think are better. Next is Summoner's Greed at a 3.71, almost an entire point higher than the one below it at Idol Hero, but still clocking in at the F category, so showing you just how separated some of these games are. Summoner's Greed is actually a game I think some of you may enjoy. If you're looking for that really casual game to just play on the toilet one day while you're at work, you're looking for just like a simple tower defense game where you're constantly getting to do gacha rolls and you're constantly getting to hit that level up button, Summoner's Greed's for you. Honestly, it comes with a ton of ads. You can pay for them to go away. I don't really understand why you would pay for just about anything else in that game, because you can beat it. It is very much a solved game. There's nothing left really to do in that game, and I don't really know why they're still releasing content in Heroes, because there's nothing to do. Slotting just a bit higher is a fully fleshed out game with a really large publisher in Comtuous and Heroes War Counterattack. This is one of the most disappointing games that I have played based off of the hype that the industry and the communities as a whole gave me. This game really sells you on its trailers and its cutscenes, and honestly, it's okay graphics, and the way that it presents itself to you, it has pretty unique looking heroes, but that's really all that this game has going for it. I thought the gameplay itself was pretty trash. I didn't understand the movement system. I mean, I understood it from a logical point of view, but from a conceptual in terms of player enjoyment, I don't get why they did it. It felt completely unnecessary. It would have been better served as just a traditional turn-based fighting game and not this quasi grid-based system without grids. Overall, this game was a flop, 3.85, and I really hope that it can turn itself around, but I honestly feel like it could just be seeing its way down from here. And guys, that'll do it for the F tier. Now we're going to be moving into the D tier. The D tier itself are games that I think could actually be for you if it appeals to you, but it's never going to be something that I actually recommend to people. And if you are an older player in that game, I definitely understand why you're not leaving the game. These are generally games that I don't see really getting more popular and will just slowly fade away. And a pretty good example of that is Hyper Heroes. I did enjoy my time playing Hyper Heroes quite a bit, but as I got closer to the end game, I realized that the walls in front of me were only passable through paying or years of service. The graphics in it weren't really up to par, but they had enough charm to it to really be considered acceptable. The progression system and the gameplay are why you are there. I haven't really seen another game that quite like Hyper Heroes as well. The top base system, and you're getting to, target and sling them places and watch them do all these cool moves and things. That was actually pretty fun. So Hyper Heroes was a pretty solid game, but it's still never going to be something that I recommend to people. 4.4. And just slightly higher than that is Magatsu Warhide at 4.43. It is a game that's JP servers have already announced that they are shutting down. And overall, I honestly think that this game is going to see itself be revived in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not under the specific name or even with the same IP, but I think the system that they built around the game is pretty solid if they can flesh it out just a little bit more. The progression system that they have, other than the top end, has a really fun grind to it, but then that grind scales with your levels as well, and you could be spending weeks. And I'm not talking about, you know, like you're logging in 2 hours a day for weeks on end playing. I'm talking about the actual weeks of gameplay, like all of the time in a week to get a singular level. It is pretty ridiculous what Magatsu Warhide had going on for it in terms of its time commitment, but I think the overall system and the direction that they decided to go and the MMO and open battle instancings, I think those were pretty fun, and I really hope to see other games tackle it just maybe a little bit better. And then tied with Magatsu is King's Raid. King's Raid is something that a lot of people still actually really enjoy, and I can kind of understand it if they've been around the game for a while, but it kind of feels like a lot of the other games out there, I don't really see what they're doing that is unique. It didn't really have anything to me that was very marketable going on for it. It had pretty solid graphics. It had a pretty solid progression system, but overall, I felt like it was fairly subpar when stacked up to more modern games. So if you're a long-term player of the game, I definitely don't see you going anywhere, and I don't see King's Raid going anywhere, but I wouldn't recommend new people to go experience King's Raid. Speaking of new experiences, we have Code Seed. This game I played in the CBT, and honestly, it had some potential to it. I don't like the execution that they actually brought, the battle system and the actual house management system, but I thought the actual character designs and the way that it felt was very, very solid. I could definitely see people getting behind this game for the graph alone and enjoying it. And honestly, much of the core content there is fairly acceptable to above average. The things that is really lacking in Code Seed was the fact that you really don't get to experience the gacha nearly enough as a free-to-play player, and the paid options are very expensive at that. You don't get to really collect much of anything in that game, it feels like, outside of your first playthrough, and then the community doesn't really exist. The game is already seeing dwindling numbers only a few months into existence. But other than that, I would say it's a fairly average game. Next is Soccer Spirits. Soccer Spirits to me is a very, very unique game. As you can see, it topping at an 8 out of 10 on the uniqueness scale. It honestly was a game that I saw a ton of potential in. If they decided to bring this game up to modern format and remove a little bit of how lewd the game got for a soccer game, I really think this game could be something. I really didn't think I would enjoy an actual combat system that passed the ball around like soccer did, but it was actual combat. It was the most unique gaming experience that I probably have had in gachas. And next is the crowd favorite Raid Shadow Legends. I don't really have to tell you much about Raid Shadow Legends. You already have formed your opinion on it. It is either the greatest game you've played or the worst game this world has ever seen. There's nothing in between. And the reasons that exist have absolutely nothing to do with the core gameplay itself. The core game itself is actually very strong. I thought the graphics are definitely above average. The progression system is very strong. I liked the gear and the actual character designs themselves and how their skill kits were shaped and things of that nature. Overall, I think Raid Shadow Legends has a very strong core. It's just that the choices that Polarium have done over the years in terms of community management and their pricing structures have been abysmal. And for that reason, Raid Shadow Legends does nothing but continue to shoot itself in the foot. They're under new management, so hopefully they turn the corner. So here's to you, Raid Shadow Legends. I really do hope you turn into the game that you should be. And then slightly above that, we have Monster Super League. I enjoyed Monster Super League while I was playing it. I don't really know why you would go directly to Monster Super League at this point in time, but I did think that the graphics had a ton of charm. I felt like I was playing a quasi Pokemon is clone. It had a pretty engaging story and world and environment. I did not enjoy the progression system in that game though. I felt like it was very, very dupe dependent at every stage of the game, more so than other games. And the gameplay itself is exactly like other games. It didn't have any new modifiers, new experiences. A lot of the characters are carbon copies of other games, but because of the way that they designed the world and the characters themselves, it really did feel like it was unique despite the core gameplay not being unique whatsoever. If they didn't price gouge you and the community community wasn't constantly dying out, I think Monster Super League would be about an above average game, but it has too many things knocking it to really break into the above average crowd. And next we have Brave 9. Brave 9 is one that I honestly had to revise based off the last video and where I added it. It was a much lower game, but let me tell you, the community came out as a whole, and that is why you see the community trending towards average. A lot of you hardcore players, I've gone back and looked at a lot of the things that they've changed about the game from my experiences and watched a couple of videos on the in-game content. And okay, I understand why a lot of you older vets really think it's a good game. It's still not something that I think that new people would really enjoy experiencing, and it's definitely not something I would recommend to a casual player, but we will put it at a 4.85, and I think that that's fairly appropriate seeing the size of the community and how interactive you guys really are. And then finishing just a tick above it, we have Summoner's Glory. Summoner's Glory is honestly, for an autoplay game that it is, where you are an autopathing game, it's pretty fun. The MMORPG aspect in gacha games, I haven't always enjoyed. I think that they are played kind of down because of the autopathing system and that open world concept. They just don't really translate to mobile all that well, and games like that on mobile, if they seem dead, they're probably going to be dead. I think that Summoner's Glory is trying really hard to change that. If more people played Summoner's Glory and got into it, I think that this game would actually be pretty strong. I thought it had one of the more fun rolling systems as a whole, where other people around you can be rewarded just by helping you roll, and the person that's rolling gets better percentages if there's more people around you. It's a very interesting system. I didn't think the graphics were that bad, and overall I enjoyed playing it. 4.86 though. And now we are breaking into the C class. The C's in my tier list are the average game. They are games that I could honestly see people wanting to play, be recommended, and enjoy, but a lot of these still have their very obvious downfalls. I don't think there's a better example to show you the industry's staple average game than Lord of Heroes. I think Lord of Heroes plays all of its cards the way that you expect gacha games to play its cards. It has very outstanding graphics that feel super unique. It tries to tell you a compelling story, but often falls slightly short. It has a progression system that is built primarily around your wallet, and the gameplay is still not really changing much from the early implementations of Final Fantasy in the late 90s, early 2000s. You bundle all of that together and you have a gacha game called Lord of Heroes. But slightly higher than that at a 5.14 is Puzzles and Dragons. This is one of the oldest games in the gacha industry, and it is still a very strong example of what a gacha game could be. If somebody came around and modernized the graphics, even though at this point the retro feel of the puzzle system and the character designs, they still feel kind of fun. The two things you really get out of Puzzles and Dragons, and I'll just say this about this, is the puzzle system itself is just super fun. I will still just go play that game to play the puzzle system itself, have nothing to do with the gachas, and then just evolving your units. And on a similar vein is Pokemon Masters. Now, Pokemon Masters kills it in uniqueness, and a lot of you will understand it the second I say this. People are going to download it because it's a Pokemon game, and no other game can take that crowd away from them. It's a Pokemon game. Pokemon needs to do a lot of bad things at this point to not make money. That IP is stupid strong, and they continually will put out games similar tier to Pokemon Masters if it keeps printing them money at the rate that Pokemon Masters does. In terms of its actual core gameplay though, and the new things that it brings to the table, the stories that it tries to tell, it's not a good game. This game is carried by a few things. It is accessible and acceptable to a younger crowd. It has strong graphics just because it has Pokemon involved. It is Pokemon, so it has an amazing brand, and people play it, so it has a decent community. Those are the recipes that make Pokemon Masters an above average game. Outside of that, it is not something I recommend anyone to try. So if you aren't looking for a Pokemon game, don't look for Pokemon Masters. And that leads us right into Cookie Run Kingdom, which I think kind of flips itself on its head compared to the last one. It is a unique game because it is a unique game. You are literally cookies fighting cake. How unique is that? Very freaking unique. It is a marvelous world around you that feels very specific. At first, you're like, I don't want to play with cookies. What is this? What is this? But then you quickly see the charm behind the cookies, and you kind of get behind it a little bit. It has its own like castle building system and things like that. You get to design your castle, blah. But overall, it's a pretty solid game. I don't think that the monetization practices that they put in place are actually very helpful for the game's longevity. And I don't really see them being able to introduce heroes that really bring a lot of new mechanics to the game that impact the end result. It really will just be turning into a calculator type of game. But I still think that Cookie Run Kingdom is something that people should check out, and it's something that a lot of kids would probably really like. And then also tied with those at 5.14 is AFK Arena. AFK Arena is a game that a lot of people still to this day enjoy. It is actually a very strong game. It lacks in gameplay because it is an AFK game, guys. I mean, let's be honest, any game that you can step away from and come back and the majority of your work is done for you is kind of rough. It has a very, very strong community though. It has a very strong progression system, but it is very, very gated at the top end by dupes. You will need hundreds of heroes poured into one hero for it to evolve yet again. And at some point you kind of get tired of that grind and you leave the game. That's just kind of how it goes. But I think the actual combat that's involved, the decisions that you make, it's actually pretty rewarding. And I was pretty interested in that draft mode when they released it. So it looked very much like Lilith is trying. And I think overall Lilith makes a pretty strong game. All right, as you guys can tell, I had to record this over multiple days, but let's continue on. Next, we have Alchemist Code at a 5.28. Overall, I thought Alchemist Code was a very strong game that's pretty dated. A lot of the people that I have talked to that have played through it for a very long time have said that the story is immaculate past the first campaign. I only played portions of the first campaign and the story seemed like it was about average, but the fact that everybody keeps telling me how great the story is past that, it really seems to shine in that perspective. It is one of those grid-based combat systems closer to like Fire Emblem Heroes, but if you're looking for a mix between that and like an old school Final Fantasy type of feel in terms of its graphics, this may be for you, but because of the way that the graphics play out, I don't think that Alchemist Code is something that the masses would actually enjoy too much anymore. So though it is an above average game at a 5.28, it's probably not one you're going to see a ton of people recommend outside of the gacha purists. This game overall really shines just because of the IP that it brings to the table. A lot of the webtoon games are some of the most beloved manhwas that people actually are reading at this point in time in their lives. So having a game centered around all of those casts of characters is kind of crazy and pretty fun. The gameplay itself is probably bare bones average. The monetization is a little below average, if not maybe 4 is on the upper end of what I should have given it. And the community for it seems kind of strong. Overall, Hero Cantare is what you might want if you're looking for games centered around your favorite IPs. Then we have Idola Phantasy Star finishing at a 5.42. This game has been much higher on our list. The game continues to go backwards. Bolt Trend is about to release a new game in Disgaea? I don't know how to say it, but it's coming out soon and it has quite a bit of hype around it. Overall, I thought the story in Idola Phantasy Star was a very strong campaign. I really liked a lot of the stories that they were trying to tell from both sides and making characters seem more complex, making them seem like they could be bad or they could go good. You actually get to decide if they are the good guys or the bad guys a lot of the time. And that's pretty compelling from a story point of view. Overall, I thought the Idola system itself was pretty unique. I thought the story was pretty unique. I liked the decision trees that you got to make in the game. But overall, the monetization continues to seem to slide backwards and the community keeps continuing to die. If some of those aspects were shored up and Bolt Trend got some of the actual development rights away from Sega in terms of how it was presented to here in the West, it could actually be a much stronger game. But a 5.42 is probably the upper end of where it should be right now. Now we have a new entry in the list in Divinity Rise. I actually was very surprised by how much I liked Divinity Rise. I thought the progression system in the game was very unique. A lot of the graphics, some characters looked really strong and others looked pretty lame. It kind of comes down to what you're looking for. This is definitely something that's safe for families to be around. It's something could be fun for kids to explore. It doesn't have much of a community. It isn't totally unique in how it presents the game, its combat systems and stuff like that. It has an okay new unique feel in terms of the way that they interact with the map, the open world home-based type of vibe, whereas a lot of the other things is like a grid-based puzzle-ish type system. Overall, the story was kind of lame and it didn't bring a ton of new things to the table, but overall, I thought Divinity's Rise was something that could definitely keep your attention for a while. 5.42. And then slightly higher than that is sdorica. Sdorica is a game that I'll continue to sing its praises for. If more people played this game, if more people talked about it, and if more people found interest in it, it definitely would rate a lot higher on this ranking. It does a very strong job of monetizing its game, though a lot of its aspects are pay to win. I think a lot of its aspects are closer to the pay to win side of things in terms of the roles and then how often they come about and how much you need to progress to certain types of content. But I think that's kind of needed given the size of their player base. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. They have done things over the years that make it seem like they want for things to be more cost effective for people, but they're not in a place to actually make it more cost effective for people without shutting down. And that kind of makes sense to me given seeing how many people actually play the game. The game is is actually pretty strong. I think the progression and the gameplay are kind of, you know, industry standard, but I love the art style that they went with. It's very unique in that way, and the story itself was very well written. So if you're a gacha purist looking for a game to try that's a little out there, I definitely recommend you look at sdorica. And then right above that is Skylanders. Skylanders is like the more child appropriate version of Summoner's War. In a lot of the capacities, that is very, very true. You are not going to enjoy the story as an adult. You are not going to enjoy a lot of the combat system unless you like Summoner's War with a bit of a mana. The mana actually seems to get in the way sometimes, especially since your auto attacks can even be on a cooldown. So there's a lot of times where your characters just can actually do nothing. And that's kind of lame in a lot of aspects, but it brings more strategy to the table of how you actually manage your mana and your team compositions. So there could be a lot of intricacies that could be brought to the table with better skilled up units and more team compositions that are brought to the whole. It is a newer game. The community is coming from a stronger IP from things like Spyro. So overall, I think Skylanders is in a good place. And if you're looking for a family friendly game, this is definitely one that you could check out and will probably be around for quite a while. And the developers still to this date. So we do hope to see a little bit change in that regard. But overall, Tales of Crestoria finishes with a 5.57. And next is Exos Heroes, with finishing with the exact same score at a 5.57. The graphics and story of Exos Heroes are obscenely great. They are proficient in both of those aspects. The progression system, it does look like they are trying to make meaningful changes. They are starting to lump some of the new heroes into the old factions, and instead of continuing to pump out more whale force type tactics, which is a way of saying that you have to have the most elite rare units to get additional buffs for every other hero, which is a really, really bad pay to win strategy in my opinion. It does give some, you know, more staying power to the units that they want to feel elite, but at the same time they are selling those units actually for like $300. When they put them in a pack, you can just straight up buy them for $300, so you can kind of see where the pay to win aspect comes into play. If Flying Games decided that they wanted to make this game a little bit more accessible to free to play player, this game would actually skyrocket up the list. But a lot of the decisions that this team continues to make is very, very weak. They do give out a ton of free currency, but at the end of the day, the amount of the rarest of rare heroes that you need is absurd that it kind of doesn't really make up for it in that regard. Now, moving away from the 5.57s, we're finally at a 5.71 in Evertale. Evertale to me was actually a very, very captivating game. The very first campaign was very fun. I like the graphical elements, even though they are 2D-ish, they are a little too cartoony at times. I think that it came about very strong in the actual battles, and the world instancing was pretty fun to walk around. But after campaign 1, they kind of went away with that entire system. The monetization in this game is poor, and the community keeps sliding back as well. But overall, I thought Evertale was a very, very strong game that is incredibly fun for your first playthrough. And then slightly above that is Goddess of Genesis S. I think Goddess of Genesis is one of those games that people continue to sleep on. It actually does a lot of the traditional things very, very well. I like the graphics. I like the combat system. I like the way that the heroes fit into that system. Overall, I thought it was a very strong game that not many people play. It had a lot of new events and things thrown in there that I thought were actually fun. I think the issues that keep it away is the way that they monetize this game with the separate summoning currencies for new banners compared to old banners, so it makes it a lot harder to save. Everything in the game is slightly expensive, and they are really basing a lot of progression mechanics that you would think that would be core to the game itself behind things like monthly spins and monthly packs and things of the sort. So on the monetization side, it is weeding out a lot of the free-to-play community, which in turn makes the community smaller. So even though overall I think the monetization is just below average in some respects, but not like abysmal, I think that the way that they went about monetizing the system as a whole weeds out an entire class of people, which generally make up the largest part of your game. And here we are now in the B category. This is the 6 or higher. These are the games that will be around for a while. They generally have a stronger publisher, a stronger IP, a lot of money spent into what is happening, and then there are some surprises thrown in there on the way. I think a good example of what a B game is actually here at the 6.00 in Fire Emblem Heroes. Fire Emblem Heroes has a very, very strong unique. Everybody knows what Fire Emblem is if they are slightly older. Fire Emblem Heroes just came out. There is a lot to beloved in this franchise, and honestly, the game as a whole does an okay job of bringing that to a mobile gacha platform. I think the graphics are good, the story is okay, the progression system and the gameplay continue to see ways to slide backwards in my opinion. They're finding ways to increase the power scaling without really introducing new mechanics or new gameplay experiences, and overall that's just a really bad state for the game as a whole. And we're seeing a lot of a community that was closer to the 10 side of things now drifting towards the average side of things. We are seeing a lot of the long term vets actually move away from the game entirely. That isn't good for Fire Emblem Heroes. I still think it's a pretty strong game and one that I think a lot of people that are casual would pick up and enjoy. So it still finishes at the B and is definitely above average, but it does come with a lot of qualms with Nintendo and the way that Fire Emblems as a whole in terms of its franchising and monetization are being brought to the table here. And then tied with that is Arcana Tactics at a 6.00. And I think that this is a very strong game with a small publisher, small budget that's doing things right. This is actually more of the auto chess type of variant of game, thrown with a lot of gacha mechanics into the mix. The gameplay itself is incredibly strong here if you like the auto chess. It actually has a lot more strategy than you might think. You can actually go for specific compositions. You can build your deck, your cards around the abilities that you want to prioritize. And there are some RNG factors that get thrown in there, and there definitely are some pay to win mechanics that are thrown in there as well with the Arcana and the deck building system. Currently, it being a 6 is probably limited unless they can find ways to continually increase the size of the community, which I don't really think that they are going to do. If they were able to capture a little bit more of the market and offer the game to be a little bit more free-to-play friendly, I think that we would see this scale upwards closer to a 7 even. It's a very, very strong game that I think most people that have a considerable amount of time to play an auto chess type system where it does take 20 to 30 minutes per attempt are going to get a lot of value out of Arcana Tactics, and I definitely see this being the game that a lot of people stick around with for a considerable future. And now at a 6.14, we have Romancing Saga Re-Universe. I think that this game is crazy, okay? I think that a lot of what they did with the class systems and the carding and the different skins that they throw on and how it changes their actual progression system is very, very unique and strong. I thought it was one of the most generous free-to-play games I have ever encountered. I have never played a game with as many active banners and ways to make free money and currencies and progression as I have in Romancing Saga Re-Universe, but they release new characters like crazy, so they kind of have to at the same time. Graphically, if you're not into JoJo Bizarre Adventure meets an old school RPG type feel, then you're not really going to like this. The different types of characters that are in this game look wild, okay? The way that they communicate is kind of wild as well, but the gameplay, the story, the progression, it's all there. It's a very, very strong game. And if you like the graphics, this game is definitely going to be closer to the A tier, if not the S tier for you. But there is no PvP as well, so the PvE aspects are going to have to carry you. There are things knocking Romancing Saga Re-Universe, but overall, it's still one of the strongest games when it comes to core community development, management, and monetization. And then tied with that is Lost Claudia. I really enjoyed Lost Claudia. Its graphics play on the upper end despite it being a sprite-based game. All of the animations that they throw into the game are very, very strong. I thought it had a very fun and compelling story to it. I enjoyed exploring the world and actually reading the dialogue. The progression system is kind of fun, but gets a little too grindy at the top end. And the gameplay itself is strong. I think the areas that this game could improve on is retaining a bit of its community. Right now, the game plays as a casual side game until you get to like the upper limits, and then you realize that it is now your life. Lost Claudia overall is a very strong, compelling game that if it captures your attention, it'll probably keep it for many years to come. Also tied with it at 6.14 is Stadia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, one of the hardest names for me to say for some reason. Overall, this feels like an old Final Fantasy game, which isn't technically bad. They borrowed elements from older Final Fantasy games in terms of the Brave system and the HP system that they put into the actual core gameplay of it. I think a lot of what they are doing in this game is pretty strong. I was not compelled by the story whatsoever. It's really hard for these multi-universe collaboration type games to like seemingly coexist in the same story, and I think they run into a lot of those same problems here. They're really trying to capitalize on the fact that you are attached to some of these characters through the old Final Fantasy games, and they're trying to bring it to you in a new format. Overall, I think that the community for this game is incredibly top-notch. I found it to be pretty free-to-play friendly, though I'm not at the top end of the gameplay. I have heard rumors and talked with a lot of vets that say the way that they release new changes to the games really paygates a lot of experience and really moves a lot of the meta. It continually shifts between different units, which is not exactly the best. When you do see new mechanics and things of that come into place, you want it to enhance the actual combat and the gameplay overall, not really make a new paywall. But if you are really into the Final Fantasy franchise, this game is definitely going to be the game for you, and you're really going to enjoy it. Now, just a step higher is Illusion Connect. I still run into a lot of issues when it comes to Illusion Connect and how I actually want to grade it out. I think the graphics I'm still willing to put on the higher end of things, now clocking in at an 8. I think that the actual chibi system doesn't actually play as bad as it seems on the surface, and the actual character art outside of the chibi system is some of the best you will see in any game. The story, it's there. It's not good, but it's there. The progression system, the gameplay, the uniqueness, it's all above average. It is a staple for the industry, I think. Then the monetization goes through cycles of being really poor and really strong. It's really hit or miss when it comes to that. And then the community seems to go in swings as well. Some people love it, some people hate it. It seems to be this constant evolving cluster of toxicity. I don't know how you would want to explain it. It's not stable. Overall, Illusion Connect is a fun game. If you don't want to get too serious and you're looking for a casual game to play, I think you really will find a lot of enjoyment in Illusion Connect, but a lot of the things that you will find issue with come into if you want this to be your main game. And now a new game that's still in CBT and hasn't been released global, but is a very strong game, is Counterside. I've been playing this on its test realm, and I think it's a very strong game that I hope to see new mechanics be brought in. It is a mix between a side-scrolling combat system with like Arknights and GFL meshed together. It is pretty interesting. I think the graphics play very strong. It is honestly a beautiful game. The 8 is only there because I don't think that they're actually doing enough with the side scrolling in terms of like how you manage your team and things like that. But that may also factor into the gameplay type of decision making. But I think overall it feels the most impactful in the way that it's graphically presented to you and not the core gameplay itself. You understand the decisions that you're making, you just don't actually visually see the significance a lot of the time. So I threw it into a graphical type of error because I think that it could be in the 9 to 10 range despite being a side scrolling game. The game overall is beautiful. The monetization, the community, they're kind of left to be seen. I think that the roles that they give you are pretty strong. It has a 3% drop rate, which is very compelling. I haven't really seen much impact in the weapon system. It seems incredibly strong, but I still don't know how to get a lot of weapons personally. So overall, I'm excited to see the future of Counterside. It's something I think you should be looking forward to and potentially try out. At a 6.28, that still slots in as a top 15 game, and it's not even released yet. At number 12 is Summoner's War with a 6.43. I think a lot of the issues that Summoner's War runs into is just the fact that it is the granddaddy of all gacha games, right? This game has been around for so long. It doesn't exactly tell you a compelling story, and it's not exactly trying to. You're there for the progression system and the PvP. There's no two qualms about it. The PvE is kind of just a grind fest. Overall, I felt like monetization-wise, they give you a ton of roles pretty often, but it's kind of hard to get what you want out of it, and a lot of units do seem to be falling out of favor rapidly, so it's kind of down to the publisher and the developer to kind of manage that system. But right now, I think it's pretty stable and okay. I put it at a 6. I think at some points in its history, it was closer to a 7 or 8, but it's starting to slide backwards. Overall, if you're looking for a game with a very strong community, Summoner's War is kind of for you. You know this game isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It is a cash cow for Come To Us, and it has some of the best YouTubers. It has some of the best community managers. It's a very strong community where you can find a lot of enjoyment out of. At number 11 is Fate Grand Order. I think Fate Grand Order, you are there for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only: waifus and story. It has a very strong community. It is very unique because it is part of that franchise. I think you will enjoy this game if you like its story. The combat system and the graphics to me definitely play down. But overall, Fate Grand Order is one of the elite tier games in this genre. It's just definitely not for everyone. Now in the top 10, we have Langrisser at a 6.57. I found Langrisser to be a very strong game. It's much more compelling to play this game over something like Fire Emblem Heroes, which is a very similar combat system. The only issues that I really have with Langrisser is everything scales to your account level, which makes every part of the game hard and grinding even harder. You really have to pay attention when you play this game. It does not really give you much anything for free in terms of what you earn just as like joining in and stuff like that. You really have to work for what you get. But if you really like that type of combat system, you're gonna love this game. It starts as a game that plays up for everybody, and then it quickly, and I mean quickly, turns into a game that is not really compelling for the most casual of people. So I think that's something that's definitely holding Langrisser back, but it's still a very strong game. 6.57. Now at number 9, we have 7 Deadly Sins at a 6.57 as well. This is a game that I think a lot of people will be saying should be in the S, should be in the A, and my answer to that comes down to, when did you start playing? Because if you are someone like me that started playing here recently, as this is a new addition to this list, the new player experience in this game is awful. Like, it's truly awful. You have level 80 units and you're still fighting entry level mob. They are really trying to push you to in-game without letting you enjoy any of the content before it. I was not a fan of that system whatsoever. And then the in-game progression system didn't even seem fun. So I don't know why they're trying to rush me to something that isn't fun. I think they're really trying hard to capitalize on the PvP side of things, which is very dupe centric. They're releasing new heroes that cost quite a bit to get with a really weird pity roll system. Overall, I think Seven Deadly Sins is a very strong game that they're clearly trying to milk all the can out of it from a monetization point of view. It could be better, but right now it's still elite. So if you're somebody that's played the game for a very long while and you're up to date, I can understand why you think this game is one of the best out there, but it is not something that I'm going to recommend to new players. And then at number 8 is Epic 7. Now, Epic 7 is a very interesting game. I think that this is one of the most stable and complete games this industry has to offer. The things that lack in it is side scrolling and it is 2D based. In terms of the combat system, it's not really trying to bring anything new to the table as a whole. You are here because the game is beautiful. It tells a very compelling story, and the progression system will keep you entertained. Once you get to late game, the RNG gear fest is pretty annoying, and how long it takes you to grind out 6 stars at every stage of the game is also annoying. But nobody can deny that Epic 7 is one of the best games that the gacha industry has to offer, and I personally am going to keep playing it for a very long time. It is a game that captures me. I love it, but I'm not naive enough to know that it doesn't come without its faults. Tied with it is another Eden. This is a game that I think people really should explore more. If you're looking for a game to pick up on the side, to be casual with, to just enjoy on long car trips, train rides, I think another Eden is that game for you. The story in this game is amazing. I think despite it being a traditional JRPG format, its gameplay and uniqueness feels pretty high, and though it is chibi-esque, they do a lot with the graphics in this game, despite it also playing down at a lot of times. The only things I don't like about another Eden is the fact that you don't get to roll very often, so you don't get to explore the cast. And even when you are trying to pay, there's only certain points in the history of the game that it actually seemed like the things are priced effectively. So if you're buying, it's definitely worth buying at those moments. But overall, I don't really think it's worth paying for packs in this game, and you don't really get free rolls very often. So it's not really the most compelling of a gacha format. But in terms of a story JRPG, it's definitely up there amongst the elite. And then at number 6, we have Dragalia Lost. Dragalia Lost at a 7.28 is a very, very strong game. It is a community which I think plays up and down depending on which patch cycle that they are on. Overall, Nintendo seems to be trying hard to keep Dragalia Lost relevant. They've released new systems, new mechanics, new anniversary things. They give you a ton of free summons. It is an incredibly fun game to play overall. I think it's worth checking out for a lot of people, and if this is a game that captures some people, they are hooked for a very, very long time, and it's really not trying to go after their wallet in a lot of meaningful ways. So I'm a very big proponent of pushing Dragalia Lost to people looking into this industry as a whole. It's a very strong game in my opinion, 7.28. Now at number 5 is GFL, Girls Frontline. I think GFL is one of the more unique, well-polished games in this industry. It is definitely more of a niche. Its combat system plays very high up in terms of the way you have to think, your mechanics. It is very, very team-centered, team formation-centric. You have to know exactly how you want to build out units, what they're strong at, things of that nature. And if you actually go about that progression system wrong, it could actually get pretty hard for you to advance in the game. Overall, this is not an entry-level game for just about anyone. I think they tell an amazing story. I think the combat is compelling. The strategy that's involved in it is very strong. So if you're looking for a high-end adult strategy game, I think Girls Frontlines for you is not something you will ever find kids playing, in my opinion. It's too complicated for them, and the actual graphics itself is not something that plays up to them at all. So Girls Frontline with a 7.43 is our 5th overall. Now at number 4 is slightly higher at a 7.71, and that is Arknights. Arknights is a beautiful game with a fun, compelling tower defense system. The areas in which I think that Arknight kind of plays down is that the release schedule and how much things cost is kind of prohibitive. I don't really think that the monetization side of things of Arknight is the best, especially with the way that they interact with the pity system. But at a 7.71, we got to be honest, I'm not really finding a ton of things wrong with Arknights, so I can't really gripe on it too much. I mean, look at these scores. Everything is, if a 5 is the average in the industry, literally every part of this game trends above average. They might not be elite at just about anything other than gameplay if you're looking for a tower defense format, but nonetheless, here it is, 7.71. Now at a 7.85 is the modified Honkai Impact 3rd. I think Honkai Impact 3rd is a very, very strong game overall. I'm personally not a fan of the progression system. I think that it is one of the poorer progression systems for one of these larger budget games that I have seen. It is very due, but outside of that, I think that Honkai Impact does very, very well, and the numbers tend to reflect it. As you watch Honkai Impact 3rd, it is exactly what you would hoped it would be based off the gameplay that you see on screen, and that's saying a lot. 7.85, and you're going to find a lot of people say that this game trends a lot higher if they like the progression system. Now at number 2 overall is Genshin Impact at an 8.14. It is in the S tier, ladies and gentlemen. As much as you hate the monetization, be sure to look at this screen right now as you see it, because the monetization is literally a 2. The only aspects of Genshin Impact that keep it from being a 1 or even a 0 is the fact that you can beat the entire game with the free-to-play units and the base store units, but you don't want to because there's so many waifus and husbandas that you want to get on your team that cost an absurd amount of money. This is one of the worst monetization schemes I have seen in a gacha game, but man, oh man, are they printing money hand over fist, so who am I to say something, okay? The community continually complains about how meaningless it is past AR50 to play the game and the monetization cycle of the game. But you will find next to no one that is being truly honest when comparing it to other gacha games and not AAA, multi-billion dollar games, that the graphics aren't amazing, the story's not amazing, the gameplay's not amazing, it feels incredibly unique, and it has a very strong community. Overall, Genshin Impact is the best example of gacha that we have right now outside of the actual gacha rates. We hope to see a lot more games go in the direction that Genshin Impact went with the gacha industry, but maybe they won't price gouge us as much next time around. And then number 1 still continues to be Guardian Tales at a 9.29. This game is near flawless in everything it does. The only thing that I will knock on Guardian Tales for is the graphics, because that sprite-based system is not for everyone, but they do a ton with it. It is one of the most beautiful sprite games you will ever play. You will find charms in sprite characters that, you can get a grow attached to these sprites, and it's kind of crazy. They are so good at storytelling and how funny that they can be in adding emotion into the game. Overall, this game is amazing. 9.29. If you haven't played Guardian Tales, I definitely think you should check it out. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this tier list, what I'm missing, or what you would change. I'm Gacha Jay. This is your home for gacha news, analysis, and reviews. Peace.